The finance minister is expected to be in Parliament and look at the next budget for 2015, and as expected has been the rudiment for a couple of years now. November is the appropriate period when that is done. The Trade Union Congress says that within the budget, government should review the true state of the economy. They claim that the economy is fragile, public sector pay is not rationalized, and petroleum revenues have also not been dealt with adequately. Now, what are your expectations in the budget?
Well, I would expect the finance minister to basically deal with the mundane issues that confront the budget. And for me, they are very clear-cut. The government is faced with the challenge of meeting the fiscal gap between revenues and expenditure. That is what Ghana faces. There's always a fiscal gap. We are not raking in more revenues. Our expenditure continues to be at the same level, moving up, while the revenues are falling short. As a result of that, you'd have to do a delicate balancing act to meet all the payments, statutory or whatever, that government has to do. And that is where there is a problem. Because, look, in everyday life, if the amount of money you are making is less than your expenditure pattern, you are in a hole. You have to find a way to dig yourself out of that hole, and that requires making very hard choices. The hard choices might be at an individual level. Maybe if you drank a bottle of Star every day, you might have to cut it down. If you drank 2 bottles of Coke, you have to cut it down. If you smoked a pack of cigarettes, you have to cut it down. You have to cut down on your expenditure pattern to be able to meet the shortfall in revenue. This is what government is facing, and this requires hard choices that have to be made. For instance, you determine that there are certain expenditures that can be put on hold. You have to make that decision. How do you generate more efforts into bringing the revenues up? What are the new things that can be done? You always have to use a taxing mechanism, or you have to find new ways of raising revenue. So those are the critical things. Now, the government, my expectation is that with the negotiations of the IMF ongoing and about to be concluded, at least there will be a situation where a clear path will be determined that to meet your revenue shortfalls, these are the steps to take. To meet the rising expenditure, or to reduce the rising expenditure, these are the steps to take. And those are the things that I would see in the budget from the finance minister, because continuously there are things that would have to be paid for. Statutory payments would have to be made, ongoing projects would have to be financed. Those things would have to be done. But at what levels would you have to do them so that there's some harmony in the system?
Now, going to the IMF, according to what the independent analysts have said, both internationally and locally, what was the best decision that government took at the time or has taken? Now, for the fact that we've had overruns, and this year we're likely to have an overrun as well, of course not as excessive as we've experienced the last couple of, let's say 2 years in a row, it still means that we're going to get some level of legitimacy, but also going to give some confidence to the public or the Ghanaian as to how we're going to spend in the next fiscal year. Based on what has been futuristically speculated, that could be the conditions that the IMF could be coming in, where do we need to perhaps cut our coat to our size as far as expenditure is concerned within the next fiscal period?
Well, you know, the argument of giving confidence to our investors is paramount. One, because if you look at our profile in terms of who invests in our economy, especially with short-term, long-term securities, you realize that a lot of them are foreigners. And these are people who can make demands on their money immediately, and we have to pay it as a country, because that's the guarantee for coming in to invest. Once we can assure them that we are on a program that allows us to basically raise revenues at the same time, cut our expenditures. And it's an international body like the IMF. There is that confidence that, look, no matter how much money I've invested in that economy, if I make a call on it, it will be given to me because it is servicing, it's being serviced, it will be serviced, basically. That's the fundamental thing. On the issue of what to cut, it is for government to sit down and look at what to cut. You understand? I was reading through the public statement by the TUC, and they made a strong point that government has now zeroed on public sector employment, and they think that should not happen. The question is, would you continue to employ the same number of people or more when your revenues are experiencing serious shortfalls? That's the question. That's fundamental one.
As part of cost-cutting measures?
Yes, that's one. Would you want to do that? And there are so many ways of doing it. The fundamental thing is, for instance, if people reach retiring age, and there are, let's assume 100 people are retiring from a sector, would you want to employ 100 people to replace them?
You multitask then.
That's it. So which means you would have to maybe say, okay, I'll bring in 50. And they would multitask and do 2 or 3 things that the 100 were doing in the public sector. That's an option that can be taken. For me, what is fundamentally missing in the TUC's statement, and what every Ghanaian, talk to anybody, has said so far, every time you hear the same mantra, the private sector is the engine of growth. Why is the TUC not alluding to the private sector as being the persons to employ more people? Because employment is employment, whether it's public sector or private sector. Why is the emphasis so much laid on the public sector? What about the private sector? And the TUC could make serious arguments to give proper incentives to the private sector for them to generate more jobs. Because we always seem to harp on the private sector is the engine of growth of every economy. But then when it comes to work, when it comes to employing people, the argument is always on the public sector. I have a fundamental difficulty with that. Serious difficulty. Because then what we are saying is that the private sector is only worthwhile when they can take from government. But you're not worthwhile to generate employment for the mass of the people.
But as you are also well aware, over the last couple of years, we've had consistent energy crisis, and we've had consistent depreciation of our currency, especially from the beginning of this year. Of course, we've seen some stabilization over, let's say, the last 6, 8 weeks. Okay. These have equally dented the efforts of the private sector to play meaningful roles in the creation of jobs and contributing to the revenues as it is, whether it's taxes based on their productivity. It means that government has also failed in many respects to complement the efforts of the private sector.
Granted that has happened.
So the TUC's, whatever contribution they would have or allusions they would have made of the private sector could have been non-existent.
No, it is still existent. Let me tell you why. If in their statement they even made an allusion to the private sector and said government should take all the efforts they can make to improve the power situation, okay, to stabilize the cedi for a long-term effect, that would have been much appreciated. But to harp on public sector employment as a sole reason for government to generate jobs, for me, is problematic.
You think that's flawed?
Flawed, fundamentally flawed. Flawed. Because the argument we are making is we are spending a chunk of our revenues to pay public sector workers. And then you are still harping on public sector work. What is it so much in public sector work that everybody must be in there? Is it because there's safety? There's little competition in there for positions? You are guaranteed a stable income? Retirement benefits are there? Are these the conditions why you are harping so much on it? And if these conditions are what you are harping so much on, do those same conditions persist in the private sector? I'm looking at the employer now, or the employee now, which means for me, they are not thinking so much about private sector employees, but they are harping on public sector employees because of the derivative of benefits they get from the public sector employees. And for me, that is problematic. You know, I've said time and again that if the TUC would every year challenge all employers, including government and private sector, to make the employee the focus of everything they do, employees in this country will be very happy. Look, there are people who are in the private sector making less than the minimum wage. Who talks for these people? There are people working under hazardous conditions. Who talks for these people? Occupational health and safety measures are not being met in the private sector. Who talks for these people? But they are all members of the union. That is why I have a problem with they happen on only public sector. They should go into the private sector and see what is happening there. It's important.
In moving forward, when the finance minister, of course, came to Parliament and read the the supplementary budget, etc., a number of measures were introduced, and as a result of that, these measures were targeted at making sure that we reduce, as far as we're concerned, our excessive reliance on imports, and so that we can grow whatever we have. And as a result of that, we've had some announcements being made over the last couple of months about a sugar factory that is at Komenda. We've had a number of initiatives also, and even incentives in taxes being given to
companies,
various companies or the corporate sector, etc. All these are meant to ameliorate the current difficulties that we're going through. How consistently will government still be on that very tangent of making sure that, well, we don't rely on so many imports, we grow what is our own, but consistently as we grow our own, the environment is conducive for that to thrive?
Well, government has no option. You know, if you look around the world, every economy that is able to feed itself has a stable economy. Just look around. Every economy where they grow more and use it to feed themselves and have surplus to export, live comfortably.
True, that's in the textbook. But
it's
in
not
reality,
textbook. No.
But in reality, in our country, for example, it doesn't happen.
Because we are not doing it. We don't do it. We are not doing it. I mean, textbook, yes, but it's the reality. Look at what is happening to Western Europe. When Russia decided that they don't want any more imports from Western Europe, what is happening? Prices are tanked. They'll have to destroy produce and everything because they are growing more. Their aim was to grow more to feed themselves and to export, which they have achieved. You think this country cannot do that? We can do that. You see, consistently, we always talk about things that we wish we would achieve. But actually, the steps taken to achieve them sometimes falter. For instance, this country still remains consistently a subsistence farming economy.
So government is doing something to change it?
Yeah, but is it only government that has to do that to change it?
Well, the policies and structures need to be there.
No. You see, that's I have.
Mr. Champo, they all need to be undertaken within a certain framework.
There is always a framework. If Roland today you wanted to establish a cassava farm, what government policy has to inform you of establishing a cassava farm? What is the government policy?
I need to have a ready market, for example.
Is that government policy? No. It is your own marketing device that will get you that market.
I need to get access to
funding. If you want to get access to funding and you want to attract government funding, yes, then government policy must inform it. But if you have your funds and you want to go into cassava farm, you want to go into maize farming on a commercial scale, what has government got to do in it? You see, we tend to have the feeling that government must be in our lives from day one till we die. And that is fundamentally wrong. There are things that people can do without government. If you need government support, yes, government must give it to you. But the decision to go into a certain line of work or farming doesn't rely on government.
When all the phrases used about creating an enabling environment, and all this is very much exigent on what government does. What do you think people mean?
Yes, because
for example, you're using cassava, and I go into cassava farming, but there are not enough deterrent for a lot more importers to import other cassava derivatives from other countries cheaply into our country. As a result of that,
I don't get that
okay,
point.
I need to process whatever cassava I get into a certain ready-made product, but we have cheap import of other derivative of cassava import also in our country. And so once they compete with me,
Roland,
I don't get the incentives that I need.
Roland, Ghana has an agreement with China to supply them cassava chippings that are used to model certain basic things like our phones, glue, and all those things. We are never able to meet that quota. We are never able to meet that quota. Because the mindset of every young man coming out today is that farming is for a certain class of people. That's it. We are not able to meet that quota. Who wants to graduate and go into farming? He wants to graduate and work in the bank. He wants to graduate and be an insurance executive. He wants to graduate and be an entertainment mogul. Those are the things people are looking at.
But it's not wrong.
It's not wrong.
There are people already in cassava farming. Why are they not making it?
Who said? People in cassava farming are making it. Today, look around us. All our breweries are using cassava to brew.
Well, it's only a small.
No, it is not only
percentage of the portfolio of the brands or products that they are.
It's only. Don't say it's only a small portion.
Many of them use materials that
malt hops. Yes, they do, but now
that they import.
Fine.
They don't find even locally.
But you don't grow the malt and hops here. The question you want to ask yourself: if there is one local product that you can grow here and use it, why are people not getting into it? Why are people not getting into it? And it's because of the way we have been made to understand some of these things. You have been made to understand. Take 2 or 3 Ghanaians who can establish a company and run it. Within 2-3 years, they break apart because they cannot simply agree when they've set up a framework for the partnership. These things don't last.
When they're making money, they get greedy.
That's the point. You see, our own attitudes tend to affect the way we progress as a nation. And I'm speaking from a lot of experience that I've seen around the world. I mean, I went to school with a smacker. You know, a smacker is those who produce jam, smackers. Right? And I had the opportunity of spending time on in their jam factory and their farms. First generation smacker to the last generation smacker all work in there. Even when they are in graduate school, college, they come back and work. And that generation has carried on. You understand? It's our own attitude. We form companies 2-3 years down the line, the companies are gone. You don't see them anymore. It's because we don't focus on what we have to do. These are some of the things that is not helping us develop as a country the way we have to. Because we have all the potential. Look, I brought a Japanese friend around. And he said, you guys, everything can grow anywhere. And it's true. But the question is, what is our own attitude towards that kind of mindset? It's not there. So we need to get, there's, I don't know the word to use, it's a zeitgeist moment where we have to understand that, look, to make it, we have to change a whole lot of dynamics within our own system.
But to also make it, we also need to change the dynamics of our political system and the mindset of the way we think.
I agree perfectly. The mindset must change, and it must change from the political leadership down to the ordinary person.
And coming back to the statement of the TUC, they say there's high cost of living, and all these have been as a result of the congregation of the various factors as we have them in our economy. Petroleum prices went high. Of course, they've reduced marginally, and even though there also calls for a lot more reduction because of what is being experienced on the international commodities market, etc. But you take a critical look and you say all these have influence or impact on pricing, on inflation, etc. And all these doesn't inure to the benefits or to the basic standard of living for the ordinary Ghanaian.
What is the basic standard of living for ordinary Ghanaians?
Having equity
2
as
square
far as
meals, 3 square meals, yes.
all those things that we're talking
Yes.
about. Good shelter.
A lot of these things fundamentally rest with government to do. But we as individuals also have a role to play in some of these things. You know, you're talking about shelter. A lot of people want to own their own houses, which is good. The question is, how do they want to proceed on some of these things?
For example, I want to own my own house.
Yeah, good idea. But how do you want to proceed? You want to take a loan and build in terms of acquiring the land? Do you want to get a mortgage? You want to buy from a real estate agency that already has land, has built the houses? These are things that we make those determinations on. Okay. Cost of living, food prices. How much tomatoes do we import from Burkina Faso?
A lot, actually.
A lot. Is it a deliberate government policy? The answer is a no. This is a purely private sector policy.
Meaning what?
Because it's our market women who find it cheaper to go and get the goods from Burkina Faso and bring it down. Meanwhile, we have Akumadan. We have Tono, where we can also grow tomatoes and everything.
But relatively, there are critical factors, and I've mentioned that. For example, when the average tomato grower does the cultivation of the tomato after it's past the ripe stage, getting access to a motorable road to a marketing center is difficult. And all these you don't have to discount, do you, Mr.
No, I'm not discounting them.
So they are critical
That is
factors
where
that make it easier for...
that was what I was going to
for other
go on, the
countries.
enabling environment. That has to be provided by government.
That's not being provided.
Fine.
Has to
I
be.
agree with
It's
you.
not being provided.
I agree with you. But you see, in the absence of that, what is the next thing you do? In the absence of that, if there is no road, what is the next thing you do? You understand? There are certain things that we can do as individuals and as groups better than what government can do. We need to avert our minds to some of those things.
Isn't government there to provide a certain framework and direction?
Yes, government is there to provide certain framework and direction. But government is not supposed to do everything.
Of course.
Government can't do everything.
But government needs to do a lot of the things.
Fine, government can do a lot of
Create
things.
the framework.
The framework is always there.
What they call the skeleton.
You know, the framework is there. But we as individuals
The springboard.
also have a role to play.
Of course.
Yes.
Unless you say the average Ghanaian worker is not working hard enough.
No. I haven't said they are not working hard enough. My whole argument is that there are things that we could do that we are not doing well enough. That's it. There's a difference between working hard enough and not doing something well enough. You understand? There are fundamental differences.
There's been criticism over the last couple of years of government expenditure.
It's legitimate. Legitimate criticism. The fact of the matter is, what should government spend its resources on? And mindful of the fact that resources that are spent should inure to the benefit of the collective Ghanaian. Those are the things. That's why I say the hard choices would have to be made. Hard choices. If you want to meet statutory payments, there are hard choices to be made. Does that mean stopping the construction of certain road networks? You know, let me use the simple thing, opportunity cost. Government will have to come to
Basic
that point.
economics.
Exactly. We'll have to do those things.
Okay.
And when those choices are made...
Do I get it that you seem to agree that you're not doing it well as a government?
It's not a question of we are not doing it well. It's not
You're
a
not
question.
taking the right choices.
No, it's not a question of you are not taking the right choice. I've always said the fundamental problem has been the fiscal gap that is there.
What we're generating and what we're spending.
Exactly. Once you always have a fiscal gap, you are going to have those problems. And I use an ordinary person's life to explain it. You would always have a fiscal gap when your revenues are not meeting your expenditures. You would have it. And you have to find innovative ways to get that squared up.
Government has embarked on a number of projects, and really, despite all the criticism for many independent analysts, I mean, that is positive. We're going to have an airport that will be built in Tamale. We're also going to we have a number of projects, various interchanges, one in Kaswa, there's even one that will be here, etc. And we're going to have the major roads also being constructed adequately. These are good things. Perhaps government should have spent on better things than this? Or
well,
relatively what could be better things?
Well, the argument to be made here is you need to strike a fair balance. Every country that has developed at a faster pace has developed as a result of having infrastructure in place. People are attracted to your economy when they come in and they realize they can travel on motorable roads, get to their destinations safely. When they can travel by air, get to a destination, conduct business, and come back, and they are on their way back. Infrastructure is key. And therefore, for any government, developing infrastructure is something that has to be top priority. Because the infrastructure is developed inures to the benefit of the country over a long period. You know, if you take a country like the US, you know when they started building their interstate highways? 1954. And it was not to develop the country the way we saw it or we are seeing it now. It was to facilitate movement of military hardware across the country. If they needed to move 82nd Division from Fort Bragg, there should be an interstate highway that allows them to move to New York, you know, from Fort Knox and all those places. But having developed that kind of infrastructure, it has made mode of traveling very easy. Now they do a lot of their transportation by semi-trucks, 18-wheelers, carrying produce across the country. That is the benefit of developing the infrastructure that is enduring. So it is good that a country would also get into that situation and develop your infrastructure. So that at the end of the day, when anybody wants to come and invest in your country, you can be sure that there will be constant power supply. I can travel motorable roads. I can fly and get to my destination safely, and that all the things that will enable me to put my money here are there for me to put my money into the economy. So infrastructure is key. I think that's the more reason why the government has now established the infrastructure fund, basically to gather money that will be used to solely support infrastructural development and free the rest of the economy from having to go through this hard process of getting money to finance infrastructure. So, you know, if you talk about expenditure and this, you need to strike a fair and delicate balance. But the private sector has a role to play in all of this too.
Why do you think that, well, perception about whether government adequately is on top of governance and development is perceived to be low?
Well, in this country...
among the population, I mean.
No, there is no scientific basis for what you're saying.
We just had an Afrobarometer. Like.
That's Afrobarometer. I mean, you can, if you take a...
Unless you want to discount the outcome.
No, I seriously discount it. Because look, the government has consistently said we have major challenges that we are addressing. And that is true. It is not shying away from the fact that we have challenges. But we are taking steps to address those challenges. You know, for me, what is instructive is that, look, the ordinary Ghanaian is looking for solutions that would endure to the problems they have. Enduring solutions. I want to be able to have power on 24 hours because I pay for it. I want to have it. That's my choice. The power should be available because I pay for it. That's what a Ghanaian is looking for. I want my children to go to public sector schools and get a kind of education that I want them to have, because the teachers are well trained, there is textbook for them, they have the ambience in terms of the classroom, smaller class sizes are there so that my children can acquire the education. I want my children in public sector universities, even in private sector universities. Those are things that government will avert its mind to. You understand? We have choices in all of these things, but do they provide enduring solutions? I think that's what Ghanaians are looking for at the end of the day.
But at the end of the day, Ghanaians are saying that all these that you've enumerated, and I'll again say these are all things that you put in a nice article and in a textbook or in a manifesto. I know what is real.
What is real?
No. Currently, not everybody get access to equitable education as to the best choice of schools they would want. Because when they get the best choice of school, they'll get the type of education they want.
Yes, but how do you address that issue?
Are you addressing that issue?
That's why government is providing access. Government has said access to schooling is fundamental. That's why government is building 50 new senior HSS for the kids to go to school. It's creating the access. You want to go to school, the school is not there. Where would you go? Yeah, clearing schools under trees to create an ambience for people to have a better sense of what education is all about. Those are the things that government has to do, and government is doing them. You understand? These things do not happen within a 6-month period. These are things that have long gestation periods.
Meaning what, 8 years?
Not necessarily
12
8 years.
20 years.
But it can take a while.
Medium to long term, yeah.
Exactly. These are things that can be done and are being done. So the argument that these things are not being met, for me, sometimes we have to, tinker a little bit, because these things can never be done within a single stroke. It takes time to get these things done.
The argument you're making is that you need a lot more time in government before you fulfill your manifesto aspirations.
No. It's not a question of you need a lot more time. The evidence will be clear. When they started the Circle project, people were like, "What is going on?" But within a certain time,
well, you can see pylons and
exactly. You can see.
So
it.
when you go there, you are proud. Oh,
that's
at least
it. You are seeing
John
that
Mahama is doing something
there's
good after all.
work being done. That is how government is.
Is it a strategy to make sure you place certain infrastructure in
it's
notable urban areas?
No. That is not a strategy. No, you have to do what you have to do. That's it. It inures to the benefit of Ghanaians. So do what you have to do. It's not a strategy.
The schools, the schools for which, a number of educational itemized activities for which we've had the $156 million loan, and the president has gone around even cutting sword for some of the schools, etc. How will the rest be captured in the next budget? Because 2015, then you have 2016, the last year, for you to fulfill the manifesto of building 200 new schools, secondary schools.
See, fundamentally, once 50 new schools have started, plus the World Bank money that allows us to build 23 additions, this is about 73 we are talking about now. I'm sure the finance minister will budget for another set and another set, so that 200 is completed. But you see, even if it is not even completed within an NDC government's term, we have directive principles of state policy in our constitution that enjoins any other succeeding government to continue, because education is key and it's good for the country. So if you can't do it within that time frame, doesn't mean it should stop. I think as a country, we've gone beyond that. This person started this project, I don't like it, so I'm cancelling it. It's taxpayer money that has been spent, so you need to continue and get it done.
We'll have to invite into the discussions Joe Osei-Owusu. And Joe Wise is Member of Parliament for Bekwai. Bekwai. I shouldn't have forgotten that, should I? And currently, I'm with Kobe Champong. He is the Acting National Coordinator for the Ghana
Acting Executive Director.
Interim Director.
Executive Director. Acting Executive Director.
He's the Acting Executive Director for the Ghana Entrepreneurial Development Agency, GIDA. We're taking a break. When we come back, Joe Osei-Owusu, Member of Parliament for Bekwai.